Welcome to Entrepreneurs, the Playbook. This is David Meltzer. I'm here with an old friend, Joe Hart. You may have heard of his company. He's president and CEO of Dale Carnegie. And Joe, welcome to the Playbook.
Hey, thanks, David. Great to be with you again.
It's so exciting to have you because I will tell you that I believe in mentorship, but I don't just believe in real live mentorship. I think some of the greatest mentorship that I've had are from people that are no longer here. And Dale Carnegie is one of those people. Napoleon Hill is one of those people. Dr. Wayne Dyer, now I've had the blessing to be mentored by him in person, but I've probably gotten more since he's left us than while he was here. But more importantly, you have carried the torch and the incredible success of Dale Carnegie through Dale Carnegie Leadership. And you have your podcast, which is sharing the great playbooks of success called Take Command, which is a Dale Carnegie Leadership podcast. But now you have your new book. And as I kind of perused it and I'm looking forward to listening to it, as we previously were discussing, you know, it just is so aligned with how to be happy.
Yeah.
And I know probably most people don't equate the happiness side into Take Command, find your inner strength, build endurance relationships, and live the life you want. But all it did was reek to me of, here's a great way to learn how to be happy. I consider it to be making a lot of money, helping a lot of people, and having a lot of fun. When you set out to take command, what was your main mission or your main trajectory that you were looking at with this over-encompassing way to take control of your life?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. You started with mentorship, and you and I are completely aligned. And I know we've talked before about the people in our lives who have impacted us, and certainly Dale Carnegie is someone who impacted me tremendously, and my co-author Michael Crum. You know, and we really were talking about these amazing books: How to Win Friends and Influence People, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. And, you know, in the midst of the pandemic, I mean, my gosh, we were all going through so much, and I'm leading this global company. And in January 2020, I'm watching, you know, all of our territories begin to start to shut down. And it was a terrifying time. And, you know, and part of what I took away, you know, in March 2020, I was waking up in the middle of the night, just really negative thoughts. You know, I had this epiphany, David, and it was really around Dale Carnegie talking about our thoughts and just how, you know, if basically the biggest challenge that we all have is the management of our thoughts. And if we can manage our thoughts, then, you know, you manage your life. And there's a great quote, and I know you love kind of the ancient philosophers, you know, Marcus Aurelius, who said, you know, our lives are what our thoughts make it. And, you know, for me, that was a huge turning point. And I completely recast my thoughts. And as an organization, you know, we not only made it through COVID, we're thriving, thankfully. And I think that's in large part to our franchisees all over the world and our team members all over the world. But to your question, what we wanted to do was to take Dale Carnegie's wisdom and to get it to people, to build off of it, to use modern stories, diverse stories from people all over the world, situations that are really current, that can connect to people where they are. And our goal was really to kind of pay it forward, if you will. I mean, Dale Carnegie I've been such an important part of my life. How do we help get Dale Carnegie to so many other people?
Yeah, for over a century, Dale Carnegie has been training people with the mindset. But as I've studied Dale and study you now, and Crum, by the way, it's really interesting because I've always focused early on in my career learning what to do and say by my thoughts, and, you know, really saw Carnegie's work as something that would help me do everything in a trajectory of what I think I want, to say everything in a trajectory of what I think I want by controlling my mindset. But as I've evolved as a leader and been through several trainings of Dale Carnegie and tried to listen to as many podcasts of yours as I can and your books, but it's interesting because I've moved to a different realm, and it seems as if your take, or, you know, this control or command perspective really drives two other aspects that I didn't see when I was young. I'm sure, you know, you and I have very similar academic backgrounds. We were looking at the do and say a lot early on in our careers. But I really think that your book and Carnegie's teachings and trainings deal a lot with how our thoughts affect how we believe and how we feel, which I've also learned has a higher frequency or vibration that in the laws of intention, what we do has a level of intention, what we say, what we think, but we really elevate that by what we feel and what we believe. Through the process of writing this book and what you're teaching, this inner strength, how much does it apply Carnegie's trainings and teaching to not just what we do, say, and think, but how we believe and feel?
Oh, 100%. I think that what you've touched on something that's really important, which is, we have our thoughts and what we think, and then we also have our feelings. So you have thoughts and emotions, and really, and just to back up, take command is really about, being intentional. It's about being intentional with our lives. So often, we can let our days and our weeks and our months go by. All of a sudden, years go by, and we're like, "How do we get here?" I haven't been doing the things that I wanted to do, or from an intentionality standpoint, going to your question about thoughts and emotions, take command of my thoughts and emotions, which is the first part of this book. First of 3 parts is about being intentional and saying, you could have, and Dale Carnegie talked about this, 2 people in the exact same situation, same set of facts. One person is miserable and negative and victim and down, and the other person is thriving and looking for opportunity. And it all comes down to our thoughts, but our emotions tie into that too, because we've got, if I let myself get down, if I let myself get angry, resentful, frustrated, all of these things can keep me from moving forward. So the book has stories and strategies really about developing your thoughts and your emotions and helping to make sure that they are serving us instead of our being kind of just a victim to however I happen to feel in a particular moment.
When you look at the foundational principles that can be expanded and applied to each and every decade, as something's over 110 years old, it changes how it's applied and how it's looked at. A gentleman that maybe you're familiar with, Dennis Waitley, who's one of my mentors early on in my career as I graduated law school and went more the internet route with my law degree than the supposed where I was supposed to be as a oil and gas litigator. But he said something really interesting when he handed me Dale Carnegie's book in my early 20s. He said, "David," he said, "this book, it will just plant a seed for you." He said, "My goal in life is to plant seeds under trees that I may never sit under." And Carnegie's one of those people that probably has planted more seeds in our leadership and culture than anyone in our country, not just because of longevity, but the impact of the content that people like you are carrying on and amplifying as well. For you, when was that seed put into your harvest, and how has that seed grown and continue to allow you to plant other seeds with your new book, which, by the way, if I would have known it was coming out January 10th, 2023, I would have asked you to delay it one day, because my birthday, I was born January 11th at 111. I could have brought you some extra karma, some extra luck with the 111 situation, but go ahead.
Well, I wish I had known. It's always good to have good karma, but well, I mean, thank you for the question. Your question takes me back. My father and my mother, I had phenomenal parents, and I grew up in a house that was a very supportive one. My dad in particular used to say, life's about personal growth. He was very goal oriented, and he was the first person to start talking about Dale Carnegie. He gave me a copy of How to Win Friends when I was in my teens. My mother was a 1965 Dorothy Carnegie graduate. She took the Dorothy Carnegie course. And so I grew up in a house where there was this, talk about Carnegie and the principles of and interacting with people and so forth in a positive way. But it was not until I took the Dale Carnegie course in 1995, I was as a young lawyer, which I know you can relate to. You're a young lawyer, you think you got, the world figured out. And that course did 2 things. Maybe 3. One is it changed my vision, because it challenged me on what do you want to do with your life. It helped me gain empathy and really a much better sense about how I could interact with people in a more constructive way, because I think at that time I wasn't really, I was just it was about me, and it really was a lot less about other people. And the third thing was it gave me the courage and frankly the guts to ultimately leave the practice of law, go into business, and then ultimately to start an e-learning company in 2000. So it was a long time ago, but you're right about the seeds that are planted, because I think, Dale Carnegie you think about the tens, the hundreds of millions of people over the years who've been impacted by his thinking. How to Win Friends has been a best-selling book for 86 plus years. So, I mean, those ideas continue to plant seeds. And frankly, our hope is that Take Command will do that, and it will point people back to read How to Win Friends, read How to Stop Worrying, take a Dale Carnegie course. These are things that will enrich people's lives and help them be more successful in their careers and their relationships and their futures.
Absolutely. One of my favorite takeaways is that we shouldn't listen to ourselves. We should talk to ourselves. And we've talked about taking command of our thoughts. We talk about taking command of our emotions. We've talked about taking command of our life and with the intentions. I call it the 5 levels of intention. But you also talk about something that scares everyone. You know, we talk, the past is full of regrets and guilt. And so if you can identify that, you can free yourself. But the future's always full of anxiety for a great reason. We don't know what's going to happen. That's one constant. And you teach really, or talk about what questions to ask ourselves, how to talk to ourselves when we're developing a future for ourselves. What are some of the ways that we should talk, or questions we should ask of ourselves in order to take command of our future, which carries the most anxiety of anything in our lives?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. You know, we talk in chapter 4 of the book about building self-confidence. And, you know, that self-confidence consists of, you know, both our self-efficacy, which is the belief that we are capable of doing something, and our self-worth, that we ourselves are valuable. And, you know, part of what we talk about in that chapter, and I guess I'd say a couple of things. One is that it's important to kind of sometimes look back to look forward. So you look back and you recognize the things that you've done. You know, a lot of times we can be so self-critical. It's like, time out, you know, think about all the things that I've done well and right to get to this point, and acknowledge some of those things. You know, another thing is just to pay attention to how we are talking to ourselves. Dale Carnegie had said, you know, is it silly for me to give a pep talk to myself every day? It's like, no, it's not. You know, I mean, to be able to have that kind of affirming talk and to remind myself in a positive way, because it's in doing that I build my mindset, right? And I build that kind of automatic habit of just seeing the world. And then that gets to the other part of your question, which is, okay, am I willing to take risks? What am I really afraid of? There's a great quote that I love. I don't know who said it, but that everything you want's on the other side of fear. Everything you want's on the other side of fear. So if that's the case, are you willing to take the risk? And so much of our fear exists in our minds, right? So if I can build the mindset which says, you know, what is failure? Is failure trying something and just not achieving it? Or is it, you know, I'm going to try something and if I learn from it, then that's a success. You know, so a lot of this is interconnected, but the first part of this book is really about helping people get to that point where, you know, we have self-confidence, we've got courage, we've got resilience, we can handle adversity, we can take risks. And then we talk about part 2, taking command of our relationships, and part 3, taking command of our futures.
And as you look at all the different chapters in the book, it really holds a tonality, as Carnegie did, with clarity and vision. But one of the other aspects that I think that has been more an application of Carnegie and can show how well you know the training, how well you know your own stuff, was the idea of balance with prioritization. See, a lot of people look for a falsity or a facade of balance that we're incapable of achieving every day, or would it be good for us even? And I love how you address balance within the context of the clarity and focus, to add balance, a weighted balance according to some sort of prioritization in your life. How have you been able to effectuate that with all the different varied successes and amplifications of interest? And now with your new book, even in the podcast, and your job as CEO of Carnegie Training, how does that balance interplay for yourself as you were writing the book? And were there some reflective stories yourself when you were talking about it in the book?
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, the issue of balance is a really tough one for all of us, right? For you, for me, for all of us. We get a lot going on, families, you have businesses. And so how do you prioritize everything and balance everything, so to speak? And, The answer is I don't know that it's always fluid, but it should start, I think, with values. And so we take people through an exercise of just, defining what are the values that are the most important to you, and what's your vision for yourself. And at the end of the day, how do you want your legacy to be remembered? We've got a whole range of stories of people, who have gone through this level of exploration and self-exploration to say, what's really important to me. And sometimes people are afraid, to your prior question, they're afraid to take that chance. But when we have a strong enough why, when we have a clear sense of our values and that vision for ourselves, and when we've conditioned our minds for success, then we can move forward in that kind of way toward balance. So I think balance is something that's constantly, it's fluid. It's not going to be like perfectly balanced Zen every day. But if I'm doing the things that are important to me and I'm aligned with those, then that's pretty good. And by the way, some of the stories I think of people, I love some of the stories in the book. We had my co-author Michael Crom interviewed over 100 Forbes under 30 under 30 people, and there's some incredible people who really got in touch. There's Daniela Fernandez is someone who at 19 was so passionate about the oceans that as a Georgetown student, she started what is today the largest sustainable ocean alliance in the world. So she's driven by her passion, and she talks about, different ways that she balances everything else. She's in the podcast, but there are a lot of stories like that really, I think, can, the example teaches. And that's one of the things I hope that comes from the book for the reader.
Well, I think so many people, especially post-pandemic, or if that's what the period that we call it right now, realize that we do have to take command of what's inside of us, our mindset, our heart set, and our hand set. And nobody does it better than Carnegie, and no one does it better now than you with your podcast, Take Command, but also,
thank you,
of course, your book. And I want to encourage everyone. It came out in January, a day short of my birthday, but I'll celebrate it anyway. These seeds have been growing for over 110 years, over 30 million copies worldwide of How to Win Friends and Influence People. We got a little bit ways to go with Take Command, but understanding the content in this book, I'm sure it has the evergreen, lasting, sustainable seed planting capability that Carnegie had, and we will not miss the beautiful book that Joe Hart and Michael Crum have come up with. Joe Hart, President and CEO of Dale Carnegie, needs no other introduction. Thank you so much for joining me and sharing your playbook. Go get Take Command. I promise you, your life will be at ease. I appreciate your time. Thanks so much, Joe.
Thank you, David. Great to be with you.